Welcome to the Leadership Roundtable, a peel back of the curtain of how ITR has stayed the worldwide leader in forecasts. As always, I'm Lokar, and I'm looking forward to diving in with our team. This episode focuses on our unbiased perspective. We hope you enjoy. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this latest Leadership Roundtable. Now, an unbiased perspective is what we're known for at ITR. It's what we're valued for by our clients, and it's, I think, foundational to sound analysis. And Kim, you have done a ton of research from our client base for why that matters to folks. What did you hear most commonly? Why did that always come up near the top?
Simply put, because it's so hard to find. Just when you start trying to look on the internet in general, trying to find a guiding light, a lighthouse in the storm, they're all tied to something when you dig far enough. When you get into the weeds of what it is that you're reading, somehow it has some sort of agenda or perspective that it's trying to get across. And here at ITR, our data-driven approach, we just simply look at what is, right? You look to see what has happened, how is it impacted, the things around it, including the businesses of our clients. And then that's what we tell them, the good, the bad, the ugly. Sometimes it's good news that they want to hear. Sometimes it's not good news that they don't want to hear, but we say it anyways because you have to know what's truly going to happen so that way you can plan for it. I think back to Jackie, the example you often use is if you knew that your house was going to burn down in a year, right?
I don't say that. That's awful. Whoa.
How would you plan differently?
I tell you,
right?
It's going to rain. You take it to a house fire, Kim.
Well, it's a little bit more dramatic, and for the day in which we find ourselves living seems appropriate. So if you knew your house was going to burn down a year, what would you do differently, right? You'd put a strategy together. And so unbiased is the only way we can possibly keep to our core values and keep to the essence of truly what ITR is and do our jobs.
Now, Jackie, from your perspective, because I think, the whole unbiased perspective, obviously it's very important directly client-facing, obviously not letting that infect our thinking, but, what we're sharing, whether it's a forecast or anything else, we have an entire team of economists, and I feel like, how do you view the unbiased perspective and all the back-end research and analysis that we're doing, making sure that doesn't infect our thinking for what ultimately the client ends up hearing?
We have to always have a certain level of distrust for everything we read out there and spare it through just to find the right data. And can we back it up with data? And you've done this so many times. We get news articles from clients, we read things or hear it on the radio on the drive in the morning going, okay, they're telling us this number. I don't really believe that. Let me go and I'll look through the data and I'll figure it out myself. And you have to do that because every media source, everyone out there has their own bias. So when we're doing it internally, we always have to just go, what does the data tell us? Go back to that fundamental basic, what does the data tell us? And try and put the pieces together of the data into a big picture. It's all these various pieces, you can sort them down into their basic elements, but it all has to come back into one symphony of an orchestra to make a picture of the whole economy or company, clients, and so on. So you have to be able to separate the noise away from the music to find the real story going on.
Going to that though, I'm impressed with how well it's done. Every single employee here, we have our opinions, but we keep it to ourselves. We want to be an unbiased company, apolitical. You all do a fantastic job at it. And from generation to generation, it's going to continue. It's just what we preach, is what we believe. When I read the newspaper or I'm listening to the news, I almost feel like I have to then change it to a different channel to be able to be like, okay, I have to be balanced now because either way, the world's going to hell according to what's happening out there. I don't have to do that at ITR. I don't have to get multiple news sources. I can just turn to ITR and listen to what's actually going to be happening and make an actionable decision on the information that's provided. That makes a big difference.
Well, I think COVID's certainly a very relevant recent example. Even when it's not some extreme black swan, we're always bringing that unbiased information. But I think COVID rings so recently, at least for us, is because it wasn't just the bias, it was the volume of information. It was overwhelming, and it's everywhere you went, there was a different positioning of the data to some catastrophic end, one way or the other. And for us at ITR, we were that kind of like, I think, the lighthouse analogy rings true as far as, okay, we're just going to stay here and we're going to just report what the data is. To my earlier question to you, you said you don't even remember how to look at the data any other way anymore, and I don't either. It's just like the idea of introducing bias into that is so foreign to us because it's just I don't have I don't have some way that I want the data to be because I'm just concerned about what the data is and then what the forecast is based on our leading indicators and our overall analysis. And I think that's freeing in a certain extent. I think it certainly lends itself to more effective analysis, but certainly from the client perspective, it's more reliable and it's more consistent, I would think, as well.
It's powerful. It gives them, as I had mentioned in one other conversation that we were having, that stake in the ground that they can plan for. So I think it's all of these things combined, right? We've talked about forecast accuracy, we've talked about business-minded economists, and here we are now talking about our unbiased perspective. It's all of it combined creates this powerful tool that business leaders can use, should use, need to use in their business planning to make the most out of each and every day-to-day decision they're making.
So, unbiased perspective. It's one of those buzzwords. It's thrown out all over all the time, but for us at ITR, it's core to who we are. And our clients appreciate that from us, and they need that. They demand that from us. And I think, Matt, in your role, you see that firsthand in terms of why that matters so much to our clients.
Yeah, we see it every single day. We have clients that reach out to us trying to understand what to believe from what they're hearing out in the media, right? There's a lot of divisiveness, there's a lot of uncertainty, there are a lot of agendas. That's a big reason why having this unbiased perspective is so core to ITR, right? Just being able to cut through all the noise that people are trying to sift through to get to what really matters to them, what's really going to drive their business, what's really going to happen in the economy. So having that unbiased perspective, driven by data, not by political party, not by agenda, not by anything other than what the data is telling us. That's what's critical. That's what makes it clear for our clients.
I thought it was really cool. The other day I was talking to an industry group, and one of the gentlemen in this group was saying, our biggest problem now is we are so data dependent, we have to message the data. That's our biggest problem. And they'd worked with a different firm before, and they had pretty subjective process. And he was saying, how cool is it that our biggest problem is messaging the data now rather than, are we biased or are we unbiased? And I just thought that was a really neat way to put it.
I think for me, it's, and Eric, in your role as far as talking with clients, we're always trying to keep our eye out for what they're hearing, because we almost have to disarm it, where we check the news and you see a story about an economic data point and you open it and you just immediately cock your head and you say that doesn't sound right, and then we pull up the data in our database and it's just the reporting, the positioning of the data is not reality. It's just not what is actually happening, and it's a foreign concept for us at ITR, I think, because we don't try to forecast or I guess write to what we think the economy should be or what we want it to be. We just write to what it is and where it's going and where our methodology forecasts that it's going to be going, and it's just good, bad, ugly, pretty. It's just reality for our clients, and that's what we want to deliver for them. It's as far as like writing blogs, things like that. That's where on putting content on our website, and Eric, I'm sure you've done some of the same. It's sometimes the best inspiration is go see which headline is the most screwed up as far as the reporting, and say, okay, well, I'll fix that. That's content for me today to write about.
One of the things you shared, whether it's good or bad, right? That's something we don't hold back. It's the data doing the talking, letting us know where things are headed. And again, if that forecast, if that trajectory that we're headed on is going in a direction other than what other people want, that's the direction it's going. We're not going to steer that in a different direction just because we want to tell a better story. I think that's critical. Helping our clients through the good times and the bad times. That unbiased perspective is something they can trust.
It is. And Joe, in your role from an IT perspective, where you're really empowering our team from an analytical standpoint and the sales team as far as getting this information out there, how do you see ITR's unbiased perspective at work?
We're really pushing for we're working with some tools right now for that next generation to lead us and with automation and process changes. And one of the ways that we're doing it is on the forecasting side. With this unbiased perspective, it's really important when we're doing these tools that we're empowering our forecasters to still be that unbiased and be able to see the data as it really is. And what we're doing is bringing these tools to them. So Eric, you can take it and you can really look at what it's saying and go with it and do that messaging aspect, but we're giving it to you faster. We're building those tools. There's so much more data out there in today's world. We're in the age of big data, and we're going to take that and we're going to massage it, and we're going to use our methodologies and our processes that we do here with automation, so that way you can take it and look at it and say, yes, this is where we're going, and this is what you can expect.
Yeah, I think it's made a big difference in terms of just thinking, when I started here, and I'd be curious what your perspective is too, Connor, but remember our technology was such that, we would be able to look at this much information for any given forecast that we're doing. And now we're looking at this much information. And it's still, feasible to do because of how efficient your team has made it.
No, it's, I'm coming up on, almost 8 years at ITR. I felt like we were carving our forecasts into stone tablets when I first started. And, since Joe's come on board, the technological advancements have been unbelievable because the methodology, the wherewithal of the team's always been there, but the improvements we've made along the way as far as the tools on the back end that we're using to continue to get that unbiased perspective out there, it's been a pretty awesome transformation over the last several years. So,
I like what you said though, Connor, that, who we are, the forecasters, all of our employees here, that's who ITR is, and that's what we always want to be. It's the technology side is just driving that, so that way we can be the best that we can be, right? Allow us to do what we do best. And taking that data, with 10,000 series we can look at, we can go 100 years back, and instead of having to look at every cycle and really analyze it, we can start to break it down and give you that information so you can see what works best and what we want to use.
I just feel like this unbiased perspective, maybe for some folks can be that buzzword, but I feel like from an ITR perspective, we're the embodiment of that. It really permeates through the whole culture. I'd be curious if any of you could volunteer, some, experience, anecdote that you've had as far as, observing that at work here, at ITR. I think, for me, I'll start just, on the road so commonly. Some iteration of this conversation has had that, people that have seen ITR for years, they come and they just say, we always get excited when you see on the schedule because we know that we're going to get it straight. We know some years it's going to, we're going to have some happy drinks after the presentation. Some years we're going to have some sad drinks after the presentation, but either way we're going to feel better about understanding, where we're going. And it's whether it's, because like I said, it's an organizational thing. It's not always me out there on the road. They've seen other speakers throughout the years, but they always can count on when they see that ITR logo there, they know that they're going to get, the real deal, good, bad, or ugly. So
yeah. And I can say, working with clients every single day, one of the most important things is trust, right? With any organization we're working with, they need to trust us. Knowing that the unbiased perspective is something that permeates everything at ITR helps establish that trust, such that, it's very easy to see, and we heard this all the time leading up to 2020. Hey, we've had 3 great years. This economy is just going to continue to grow strong, right? And for us to be able to say, well, hey, things might be turning, right? We may be reaching a turning point here, might be headed in a different direction. And to show that with the data, again, it's not bias, it's what the data is telling us, and that lets them prepare for something that they wouldn't otherwise have known, which is great.
Yeah, it's always interesting working with clients, because I remember this one client I worked really shortly after I started with ITR, and we were calling for a downturn, and this client was feeling really good, basically the same situation you were saying.
Yeah.
And I remember getting on the phone with this individual, and he was saying, well, you guys have a downward bias. You're always pessimistic. And it was like a year later, their company didn't do so well, and leading indicators were moving up, and I was lifting their forecast and was saying, hey, we have all these data points that suggest we can lift your forecast. And I remember this was kind of this aha moment of, it was like, oh, But you could just see maybe you're not so biased. Maybe you're just looking at something else that I, as a business owner, don't have access to. So I thought that was a cool moment. But I mean, I think it even goes for us on the econ team, and I'm not sure about IT and sales, but we're talking about that unbiased perspective even in the interviews with candidates on the very first time they touch ITR, and I think that's how fundamental it goes to our business.
So having an unbiased perspective continuously ranks as one of the most valued aspects of ITR to our clients. And I just want to ask each of you, what does having an unbiased perspective at ITR mean to you? And how does it inform how you go about your day-to-day business?
To me, it means leaving any perspectives that aren't data-driven at the door. We hear so much on the news and the radio and all sorts of outlets, and whenever I read something from them, my immediate thing is going, okay, I gotta go check against the database, make sure this is something that I can actually rely on, because everyone seems to have their own perspective and bias. So just check it at the door, deal with the numbers, and go from there.
It's about being able to back up what we say. And sometimes we don't have the data to back something up one way or the other. And so it also means really being steadfast in our expectation of being data-driven, like Jackie was saying, and focus on the things that we do know, that we know are going to make a difference to our clients.
Can I actually jump in there?
Yeah.
I was just talking with Eric like an hour or two ago, I forget now. And he came and asked me a question. He goes, I'm about to meet with this client. They're worried that the oil prices are going to impact their forecast, but I've looked it over and oil has really no impact on their business whatsoever. And even internally, we fight our own biases because not that it's a bias perspective in the normal sense, but we go in thinking there's a hypothesis and an assumption, and we test it. So we looked at it and we said, no, the oil prices have no real bearing on this company's forecast. So admit that to them. Say, look, I would have thought this had it. There was none. Yeah. The data backs it up, so let's move on. We can trust the forecast. We've done the research.
I think it's a really good point, because a lot of times when we bring on a new consulting client, we'll ask them, are there any data sets that you have historically taken a look at? And it's an opportunity for us to look at the data, extract bias from, and say, and maybe either confirm some of their pre-held conceptions, or in a lot of cases deny them and say, this actually has no, this has a lagging relationship to your business, or no relationship at all whatsoever. And that I always really appreciate, because folks said, oh yeah, we watch housing starts like a hawk, and then we show, I was like, yeah, actually this has really no bearing on your business at all, and no relationship. But
from the hiring perspective, it's also something we're talking about in interviews too, letting people know that we are coming at it from this unbiased perspective, that it has to be data driven, and it's okay to have your own opinions about something, but you have to back them up in order to be bringing them to the rest of the group to be considered for analysis. And so it's more than just having an opinion. You can absolutely have opinions of your own, but when it comes to ITR and especially what we're messaging out, it needs to be backed up by that data. And sometimes we surprise ourselves when we're doing the analysis too. Jackie talked about one example, but there are hundreds of examples where we have an assumption. I don't know if people would call it a bias, but in economics we would call it a bias, right? A bias towards something. And when you really look at the data, it doesn't prove it out. That tells you, which way to go clearly. There's no argument between you and I once we look at the data. So it makes things easier from a hiring perspective to be able to work together, speaking that same language.
I think particularly on the road, so often with, excuse me, so often with bias, particularly political bias comes into the conversation. It's almost unavoidable. And we've gone to great lengths at ITR on the road to show the data that a lot of the biases that folks have, at least as it relates to the economy, they just don't hold up.
Come on, be honest. You guys love that moment where you're like, wait. Nope, the data says this.
Right, absolutely. It's one of those times where I feel like we can be on it. There's a certain level of honesty we're able to share with our clients at that moment, and sometimes the look on their face is priceless. And one way or the other, it doesn't matter what we're saying. They have an assumption in mind, and when we can prove to them that they need to be rethinking on their end their own biases, it really makes me feel like we've made a difference in that way of helping them understand that they should be looking at it from a data-driven perspective too, at least to make choices. You can talk to your friends about whatever you want, right? But if you're making choices in your business, it should be based on data.
As an economist, I look at data and numbers, but really seeing the people behind the scenes that really opens your eyes as to the value a team like this brings to forecasting. That's all the time we have. I look forward to more of these roundtable discussions next year. From all of our leadership team and everyone at ITR Economics, thank you so much for partnering with us and helping us to make your business stronger and the world a better place. Thank you.